Welcome, everyone. This is Dr. Mercola helping you take control of your health. And we are delighted to be able to connect with Dr. Vandana Shiva today about some really exciting topics you're going to want to definitely listen to. So let me give a little background first. So Vandana Shiva did her doctorate in quantum physics. So she's definitely got some serious brain power to contend with. So I want to give a little background because we're going to have some exciting discussions about regenerative agriculture and our collaboration together. And but before we go there, I want to dialogue about this too, but I want to set the stage. I live in Florida, not too far from where John Rockefeller spent most of the end of his life, and he actually died here, just literally blocks away from where I live. So why do I say that? Not to brag, but I'm just saying this because he was at the time the wealthiest person in the world. And a century later, Gates replaced him. And the similarities don't end there. Rockefeller was despised. He was hated, absolutely despised in the culture. So he had a lot of wealth and he was able to hire some really sophisticated PR people. And they determined that the best way to change that and shift that position around was to turn him into a philanthropist, to donate some of his wealth back so he looked like an angel. Well, guess what? Gates isn't stupid. He followed the same darn strategy. And, prior to the 2000, he was vilified. His name was dirt. Most everyone hated Gates. Absolutely hated him, especially when he was, I guess, the Department of Justice came after him.
The antitrust case.
Antitrust, that's what it was. Yeah, the antitrust. Yeah.
Exactly the kind of antitrust case against Rockefeller on Standard Oil. Now they say big data is the new oil. He's the new oil.
Yes, indeed. So. Let me just finish, and we're going to dialogue a little bit. But so then Gates came in, and he adopted this thing. So the reason I'm saying that is because for the vast majority of the population, he's viewed as a benevolent saint, literally like an angel, that he's donating all his wealth, and his intention is for the good of the planet, and nothing could be further from the truth. It is the absolute diametrical opposite. So. And I want to comment on what he's done, just briefly summarize it. And then then you're going to talk about the future, what he's done. We've all seen the pieces of the puzzle fitting in, but it just hit me recently. There is no way it would ever have been possible to have this catastrophe of COVID, literally on a global basis, if it wasn't for one organization. That organization is the World Health Organization. It was primarily they that facilitated this mass hysterical reaction and adoption by virtually every government on the planet. So why is that important to know? Because Gates is integral to the World Health Organization, absolutely integral. Last year when Trump abandoned the U.S. funding, he was the biggest funder of the World Health Organization. Pretty much everything has to come through by him. And why is this so key? Because two things. One is that we all know the vaccines are coming out now, and Gates is the biggest promoter of those, and probably is going to be a significant contributor to his financial wealth. But in addition to that, there was a massive censorship that developed as a result of suppressing every natural alternative that would be effective, safe, and and it just abolished. And even drugs they were suppressing, like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, because they were competitors to the vaccine. So that is my brief summary to sort of set the stage for this. And then we're going to go into the next, and you can certainly comment on it now, but what I want to transition to is to what he's doing now, because that was step one, or the first phase. The next phase is even worse. At least I perceive it to be. Well, I didn't even welcome you yet. So welcome and thank you for joining us with that long monologue introduction. But so what do you think about what I just said? If you can comment on that, and then we can transition into what the next step is in our collaboration with Regeneration International.
Well, I think the parallel you draw between Rockefeller as a robber baron around not just oil, but created the big finance and created big pharma.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, Rockefeller had very intimate connections with IG Farben. There was a Standard Oil IG Farben company. And without the fossil fuels of Standard Oil, the IG Farben couldn't have either made the synthetic fertilizers or the fuels. And so, in fact, Hitler's regime required this partnership, and they played it out, even though the armies were fighting. And they looked like two opposite camps, but when it came to making money, it was the same camp. A very big part of Rockefeller's history has been captured by Lily Kay when she went through the archives in The Molecular Vision of Life, how the Nazi regime, as a eugenics regime, thinking some people was inferior and should be exterminated for keeping the superior race pure, that thinking then migrated, because Rockefeller was anyway in the States, and they started to call it social psychology as biological determinism, and said the skin-based determination, we are getting attacked. So let's go under the skin and look at the atoms of determinism. The word gene did not exist at that time. They called it atoms of determinism. And then Rockefeller paid research. 99% of the research shifted to molecular biology. Nobel Prizes shifted to molecular biology and the genetic determinism and genetic reductionism, which is part of the silencing of the real true health. To have health means to be whole. To be whole means your self-organized brilliance of your integrated body as a complex system, that wholeness is true health. That's what Ayurveda is based on. Even Ayurveda has been attacked in recent times. But coming back to the parallels, Rockefeller was behind because he was driving the chemical industry. When the wars were over, they said, oh my gosh, all these chemicals to sell. And they invented the Green Revolution and pushed the Green Revolution on India. Rockefeller, the World Bank, the USAID all worked together. And if the farmers of India are protesting today, it's a result of that initiative of Rockefeller. The Green Revolution in India. Most people don't realize what high cost India has borne, what high cost the state of Punjab has borne. Then you have Gates joining up with Rockefeller and creating the Alliance for the Green Revolution in Africa. And in his new book, which pretends to be a solution to climate change, I said, my God, what kind of stage has the world reached that absolute nonsense can pass as science? I mean, I'll give you just 3 examples from his chapter on agriculture, which he talks about how we grow things. So first of all, plants are not things. Plants are sentient beings. Our culture knows it. We have the sacred tulsi, we have the sacred neem, we have the sacred banyan. No, they are sentient beings. And there's so many people are awake to animal rights. I think we need more people awake to plant rights and really tell Mr. Gates, no, plants are not things. He goes on to celebrate Norman Borlaug, whose job, he was in the DuPont Defense Lab, whose job was to push these war chemicals by adapting the plants. And so he created the dwarf varieties because the tall varieties are free varieties. We just refuse, like we refuse chemicals. Our plants said no. I call them the first satyagrahis, the fight for truth. The plants said, sorry, don't want chemicals, they lodge. And Borlaug's semi-dwarf varieties are cited by Gates as a big invention. And then he says, we're eating food because of Borlaug. No, people are starving because of Borlaug. The farmers are dying because of Borlaug. Then he goes on, stands in front of a synthetic fertilizer plant and says, the biggest invention, and I'm so happy. I'm happier than I even look. Doesn't he realize synthetic nitrogen fertilizers are creating desertification, dead zones in the ocean, and nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas? He's offering the problem as the solution. Then he goes on, talking about bad biology. He doesn't know that nitrogen-fixing plants can fix nitrogen non-violently. He says plants can't fix nitrogen. He needs to come to India and study. He needs to understand. And when he's pushing the fake meat and the impossible burger, I said he needs to come and cook dal. Once he learns how to make dal with good nitrogen-fixing plants, he won't have to speak the rubbish he's able to get away with. And finally, no, the methane doesn't come from factory farms. Yeah. Have you smelt methane behind nomadic tribes? Have you ever smelt methane behind our sacred cow in India? No, they don't emit methane. Methane is a result of intensive feed of beans to animals and putting them in these concentration camps, which then becomes emitted. That's why the K4 stink, the concentration animal farm operation, have a stink. You know what Mr. Gates wants to teach us? He says the cows emit methane because they have 4 stomachs. He calls them containers. I think we should sue him for undoing basic class 1 biology. And you've talked about how he took control of the WHO. He's trying to take control of the FAO. The FAO is based, Food and Agriculture Organization is based in Rome. It is what has recognized that ecological agriculture is the way to go and supported agroecology till last year, till Gates started to take charge. And now he's moving the food summit to New York. 500 organizations have said this is no more a food summit. It's a poison summit. The poison cartel and Bill Gates, the billionaires, are running it to push more poisons, now under new names. So we have a lot of work to do. 500 have said boycott, but we still need to come together. And we have to come together around truth and nonviolence and regeneration, and away from untruth and fakeness and violence and the degeneration of our bodies, our health, the planet, our minds. Look at the people who are sick. How many people have lost work? How many people have lost food? But how many people are sick? But in India, the farmers are doing fine. The villages are doing fine. When people are healthy and eating healthy food, there is no problem. The problem is where they've already made people suffer. And now they want to make people suffer even more. And he wants to commit a crime against our gut microbiome, pushing more fake food through impossible food. And he wants to create conditions that real food will disappear. And that's why we all have to organize together. And the scientists have to start being protected, I think our job, Dr. Makola, is there's an extinction taking place. They call it the 6th mass extinction. Mm-hmm. Most people think the 6th mass extinction is about other species. Mm-hmm. They don't realize large parts of humanity is being pushed to extinction. Independent science, good, healthy knowledge, mm-hmm. that food is health, as Hippocrates said. Indigenous systems of learning, ecological agriculture, small farmers, in Bill Gates' design, all this that makes life life, that makes society society, that makes community community, that makes healthy beings. He would like to push this to extinction because he's afraid of independence and freedom and health and our beingness. He wants us to be thingness, but we are beings.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you for commenting on that and helping to expand that vision, connecting the dots with respect to Rockefeller and the pharmaceutical industry, which is an important one. And actually, Rockefeller and Carnegie at the turn of the century were responsible for producing what's known as the Flexner Report in 1910, which is largely acknowledged as being the beginning of the end for natural medicine in conventional teaching. I mean, they eliminated it from all the medical schools. It's largely as a result of seeking to replace those interventions with pharmaceutical that were derived from the oil industry. But I wanted to go a bit more into Gates in this transition because he knocked it out of the park. He was really very clever in what he did, and it was a long-term play. I mean, he started really digging into his control of the World Health Organization over a decade ago, and he had a long-term vision. He was able to pull it off and basically engineer a whole global response. And now he's transitioning into farmland. I'd like you to elaborate on that. And here's one of my concerns, and I didn't realize this until recently because the book I'm writing next year focuses on a really one of the most fundamental elements of optimizing human health, and that is the restriction of a very specific omega-6 fat, which is typically considered to be essential. It's called linoleic acid. But if you eat food, you're going to get more than enough. So the problem is that in industrialized Western cultures, we have massive excesses. 5, 6, 1,000-fold, 2,000-fold increases above what is needed for optimal health. And the reason why that's important to understand is because one of Gates' projects, as you alluded to, was this impossible meats and these engineered meats. Now, it's really important to understand that these are not derived from some Star Trek replicator. They're made from raw materials. And the most important source of calories is fat. So where is the fat coming from this engineered meat? It's coming from, this is so crazy, you can't make it up. It's coming from genetically modified soy and canola oil. So not only do you have the issues with GMOs, but then you have this massive excess of omega-6 linoleic acid fat, which is going to absolutely accelerate destruction or movement towards every single chronic degenerative disease. So that's a huge thing. But he's also buying some farmland. So I want you to tie those pieces together and tell us what is his plan? What do you see happening from Gates's next phase?
Well, both my book Oneness versus the 1%.
Yeah, which I did an interview with you on that.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
And then we did the Gates to the Global Empire, where I realized he was entering every field that has to do with life. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because our work in Navdanya, which means 9 seeds, is basically work on biodiversity and agriculture. We started to bring together all the work that he's doing in taking over. So let me just run through. I mentioned the Rockefeller Green Revolution, now the Gates Rockefeller Green Revolution in Africa. The next step he wants to push is, he's not saying no to chemical farming, he's celebrating synthetic fertilizers, but he's now talking about digital agriculture, and he names it Gates Ag 1. And the headquarters of this is exactly where the Monsanto headquarters are, St. Louis, Missouri. Gates Ag 1 is one agriculture for the whole world, organized top down. He's written about it. We have a whole section on it in our new report, Gates to a Global Empire. Now, what does he want to do with digital? First of all, have the entire surveillance system introduced. I think we managed to stop a seeds of surveillance startup he was starting, where he would have liked farmers to not be allowed to grow seeds unless the surveillance system had approved them. But I have fought in my land and my country to have the freedom of seeds defended. Article 3J of our patent law says plant seeds and seeds are not invention, therefore cannot be patented. And interestingly, while this whole drama is going on the vaccine question, the rich countries that pretend to be doing Gates philanthropy have absolutely refused to do the waiver on intellectual property, showing very clearly it's about money making. It's all about money making. If you look at every vaccine, Gates has his finger in it. But coming back to the issue of one agriculture, digitalized, and then for this, they have to do data mining. They don't know agriculture. So Gates is financing the placing of people in farmers' homes in order to mine their data.
Mm-hmm.
How do they harvest? How do they thrash their fields? And everything. And then sell it back to them. And Bayer, which bought Monsanto, is doing that, putting out data collection like Google does. They put data collection, then they sell back the data to you. Interestingly, as far as the Impossible Burger is concerned, the Bayer has said very clearly, with the growth of plant-based food, well, all food is plant-based. Even animal food is plant-based, because everything begins with photosynthesis. Everything begins with plants. But you can eat real plants, or you can eat the fake food. Now, the growth of fake food, which is totally engineered. First, 3 years ago, I think they created an Eat Forum and started to talk about this being the solution to all chronic diseases created by industrial agriculture. And who's on board on the forum? Who's on board on fresh? The poison cartel, the Bayers, the Monsantos, the fertilizer industry. Bayer has said this demand for plant-based, which is another way of talking about fake food made in lab, basically it'll make an increasing demand on row crops, as they call them, and larger scale production. Now, no more of food, but of raw materials, of the carbohydrates, the fats, the proteins. So food is now being dismembered to become raw material for factories, which will be the lab. And he's driving this. But all this eventually begins in seed. So my work started on seed because the Monsantos wanted to patent it. I said, no, you don't invent the seed. You will not patent the seed. And we worked to create community seed banks, reclaim our seed freedom. Now, Gates controls all the seed supply. During the Green Revolution, the Rockefeller Green Revolution, I'll call it, the World Bank financed international research institutions. They collected all the seeds of the farmers, and they're in these gene banks, which have everything that farmers ever grew. Then the farmers were forced to grow chemical varieties and Green Revolution varieties. Now Gates controls all those CG systems. Gates is controlling the seeds of the world, the research of the world, the knowledge of the world.
How does he control them? How does he control them?
Through funding, of course.
Okay,
Just
so
like
he doesn't own them. He's just like he controls the media, I guess.
Yes, money control.
Okay,
money control.
Okay, so he doesn't outright own these seed companies, but
they're not companies. There are public collections. There are public research.
Right.
They're the public commons of agriculture. He's taking control. But control in this field means, and then he uses, you see, at that time, the patenting was done through genetic engineering by actually introducing genes. Now he does it through genomic mapping. Yeah. He's got all the collections. All you need is little bits of seed. Just read the genome. Your passport data tells you this is a drought-prone seed, a salt-tolerant seed. This one has a fragrant rice. You don't have to know anything. The passport data tells you this is what it is. You do a genomic map, take a patent. He has editors See, he financed the research on gene editing to undercut all the biosafety laws of the world. But the only country which doesn't have biosafety laws is the United States. But the rest of the world does, because we have a UN treaty called the Biosafety Protocol, Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety under the Convention on Biological Diversity.
Okay, wait. Hold on. Time out.
Yeah.
So how did he finance this thing? I mean, wasn't aware of this. It's really intriguing.
Well, my reading, and this is what I put in the oneness versus 1%, is when he is creating appearance of philanthropy, what he's doing is giving tiny bits of money to very vital institutions. Mm-hmm. But with those bits of money, then attracting all the government money, which was anyway running those institutions. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But now, because of his clout, he is taking control of the agenda of the institutions, meantime, pushing patenting. And because he's pushing patenting, whether it be on drugs or on vaccines or on seeds, so the gene editing, which is the new GMO technique, and the first two applications had to back off because they said, this is not a GMO. And then John Fagan found a test which could detect that it is a GMO. And then they realized they could be sued because they wanted to sell it as natural, but take a patent. The company that is collecting the patents on gene-edited organisms, whether in health or in agriculture, is a company called Editas, started by the person who was the main financial investor for Gates Foundation. And Gates is a very, very big investor in Editas. So he has a company called Editas to edit the world as if it is a word program. The two scientists who got the Nobel this year have both been funded in their research.
Oh, Jennifer Doudna, who got it.
Right. Right. And my mind went back to how Rockefeller financed the research, got a Nobel, and then made the money. So you finance the research, you finance the public institutions, whether they be national or international, but you then invest and you force them down the path where they can only use what is your patented intellectual property.
Wow.
And as he has said in an interview, his smartest investment was vaccine because it is 1 to 20 returns. 1 to 20 return. $1 put in, $20 made. But how many billions of dollars have been put in? So you can imagine how many trillions will be made.
And Mr. Gates, thank you so much for being with us. I'd like to talk to you about your approach to vaccinations. You wrote something recently, and like you always do, you kind of looked at the problem from a scientific and business perspective on things. You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
Well, it's pretty impressive that when you take these vaccines, get them to be very inexpensive by making big volume commitments, have that right relationship with the private sector, get the delivery system so they're really getting the coverage out there, you literally save millions of lives. And 20 years ago, when we created these new multilateral organizations, Gavi for the vaccines, Global Fund for HIV, TB, and malaria, we didn't know they'd be successful. They've gone through lots of challenges about making sure the money gets there, making sure the efficiency is right. But as we look at upcoming replenishments for those, and we've got so much distraction politically that the international needs like this could get eclipsed if we're not careful. We see a phenomenal track record. It's been $100 billion overall that the world's put in. Our foundation is a bit more than $10 billion, but we feel there's been over a 20-to-1 return.
Actually, crypto would have been a better investment than that, but but yeah, still, I saw that interview. He was, I think it was at Davos, it was some cold place, and he was bragging about the 20-to-1 return. But you're right. When you put in billions, it adds up. It adds up quite.
Yeah, but
rapidly.
Dr. McCall, I haven't finished the story.
Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting.
So, at the end of it, where does food come from? It comes from seed. He wants to control it. Comes from land. He's controlling that. He's become the biggest landlord of America. Yeah. And that's all over the place with Forbes and all. It doesn't even have to be investigative journalists digging this up. It's now the top financial news. But you need weather. You need a stable climate. So what could be a weapon of control on agriculture? Weather modification. He calls it geoengineering. Mm-hmm. This is engineering the climate, again, making it look like he's going to solve global warming by creating global cooling, by polluting the atmosphere. And in fact, there's going to be a campaign launched, and I've been asked to be part of that launch, where he's financing Harvard to do a geoengineering experiment. But this weather modification and modifying the Earth's balance is not just a way of destabilizing the Earth's climate systems more, but then taking into your hands the decisions you'll make to create a rain at harvest time, to create a drought when farms should be getting sowed. And we have had very strange occurrences. There's kind of a predictability of weather, and we know there's climate change. But somehow at harvest time now in India, you have to have horrible hailstorms, and the hailstones are sometimes that big.
Wow.
So weather modification, and worst, to me, the worst crime against the earth and against humanity is using gene editing technologies for gene drives, which is a collaboration of Gates with DARPA, the Defense Research System. And the gene drives are deliberate driving to extinction. Now, he does it in the name of ending malaria. No, it's about driving to extinction. Monsanto created superweeds by using Roundup-resistant soya and Roundup-resistant corn. Amaranth is one of the biggest superweeds. Amaranth is a sacred food for us, a very, very important source of nutrition, both in green as well as in grain. There's an application in that DARPA Gates report of driving the amaranth to extinction through gene drives. And when this was raised at the Convention on Biological Diversity, you know what he did? He actually hired a public relations agency and bribed government representatives to not say no. Can you imagine? He is corrupting the UN system. He's, of course, corrupted the governments already. We've seen that with the whole WHO phenomena. But now he's destroying the edifice we built over the last 20 to 30 years in protecting the global environment, whether it be the climate treaty, the biodiversity treaty, or the atmospheric treaties. he is absolutely behaving as if the UN is his subservient institution. Governments and regulatory bodies should not exist and do not exist. And of course, people in democracy have no business to speak. Otherwise, they're conspiracy theorists.
Well, that is pretty amazing compilation of information about Bill Gates. So I'm curious, really curious, as to what your speculations are for his motivations, because I mean, he's already one of the wealthiest people in the world. I mean, it's hard to imagine having $1 billion and being able to spend it all in your lifetime, but he's got over $100 billion. So it clearly isn't money alone. I mean, I think you alluded earlier it was power, but is there an end game for his power, acquiring even more power than he already has in control? Is it related to the fact that his father was a leader in the movement of Planned Parenthood, and some speculate this is a tendency towards eugenics and really depopulation strategy? I mean, what is your best guess as to what's motivating this unbelievable collection of activities that seems to be dedicated to decimating the population of the earth?
Well, I think money, of course, has a role in this. Otherwise, he wouldn't need to do investment through his philanthropy. He'd do plain philanthropy, then he'd give and his money would keep decreasing, right? If I have 100 billion and every year I'm giving away a few billion, I should have less of it. No, but he gets more of it.
And do you know how he does that? He does it through loopholes in the tax system.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
His foundation is actually able to invest in other companies that directs him personally. Should be absolutely illegal and should be in jail, but he's able to do it.
Yeah, but I think these are the issues that need to be taken up. Because what's happened is that ordinary people are having to fight their individual battles when these are about institutional, structural, societal crimes. And they need to be taken up the way Rockefeller was taken up and Standard Oil was broken down. So all the empires, the Gates empire is multiple empires. But at the end of it, it's one empire. So definitely making more money, because those who fall into the trap of making money don't know when to stop. I call it the economy of the cancer cell. They don't know when to stop. But it is definitely power, the love for power. And I feel this kind of love for power, at the end of it, comes from deep fear. It comes from a deep fear of small people living joyfully in their freedom. Yeah, I got 100 million. How can that poor peasant love to till the soil? I'm going to take that away from them. So it's fear of freedom, the fear of the small, and the freedom of life without you.
Why is the next decade the determining decade?
Because these petty minds, insatiable greed, wants to go so fast that if in the next decade we don't protect what has to be protected and build resilient alternatives and take away the sainthood from this criminal, they will leave nothing much to be there to be saved. So, when 87, I heard the chemical corporations, the poison cartel, which is also the big pharma. People think agriculture is here, medicine is here. No, the same criminal corporations gave us agrochemicals. They gave us bad medicine that creates more disease than it solves. So big pharma, big ag, big poison, all one. And Bill Gates is holding it all together even more and trying to make them bigger. Because he has investments in all of them, all of them. He's constantly investing. So when I go back to when the chemical company said we'll own all the seed and no farmer will be allowed to save their seeds and we'll have an international law and all seeds will come from us. We'll be 5 companies and all seeds will be GMO and patented. And I said, no, you won't have your way. We'll save one seed at a time with all the love we can pour into that saving. And today, seed saving is a global movement. It's totally a global movement, the seeds freedom movement. So I think that's the first place we have to begin because Gates wants our seeds. Gates wants our seats.
It's so easy to get despondent and depressed about everything that's happening. I mean, just listening to your description of what Gates has done, you just want to give up, but it's, if you take it as an inverse paranoid perspective and it's a problem, it's going to be, it's great because we can find a solution to make it even better than you could possibly imagine. So I'm excited. It's going to be some challenges, but there's definitely many things to do. And I really, because I mean, Gates is only part of the problem. I mean, it's much bigger than just Gates.
No, and they put him in front because they thought he's a good angel now, If he was his old self, they'd have picked someone else.
Yeah. He's he's a spokesperson. Yeah.
He had a makeover and he's a spokesperson. And the sad thing is the control over media, the control over digital media.
Oh, yeah.
The way they can just remove your communication. I've lived through this because when I was fighting Monsanto, my personal website is still down. They didn't ever let it work. But whenever I do a brief for our courts, my systems would crash. I'd have to dictate and write by hand and sit with my secretary, and she'd use her personal email to send to the lawyer. I mean, I don't know how I fought Monsanto for a decade.
Yeah.
But today Monsanto is gone and it's Bayer,
Yeah.
So when you think of it, Monsanto was the most powerful evil company then. It's gone.
Yeah.
Let's envision a world that a decade from now, just like Monsanto disappeared, Gates as a philanthropist will disappear.
Yeah.
And his being the master of the universe idea will go, and he will go and do penance somewhere.
Well, it's not just Gates, as we discussed. I mean, it's the technocrats, it's Klaus Schwab, it's stealth people behind the scenes and who are also billionaires like Eric Schmidt, who really directed Google from their ostensibly noble goals when they first started to where they're at now. Literally probably have replaced Monsanto as the most evil company on the planet. And, so we got to avoid those. And, so it's essentially the one word that describes all of them is technocrats.
So, I did a little book with the leading Ayurveda of India, Dr. Gangadharan, because these patents were coming out, the Impossible Burger patents, and then the Microsoft patent on us being users of their machines and algorithms, and the Google patent on putting nanoparticles in our blood to solve the problem of anemia. That's when I realized they've got into life sciences, Google. So this little book is called Two Futures of Food, Health, and Humanity. And my colleagues with whom I worked in Kerala, the people who did the Ayurveda bit, they put it as a Kindle. I think you can download it as Kindle.
One of the reasons that we're so confident we're going to win is we outnumber them tremendously. They don't stand a chance if we all organize and collaborate, and they understand that. And that's one of the reasons why they're focusing so down hard on censorship, the spreading of the truth information to the public, because they know if large numbers of people get a hold of this information, it's death to their ambitions.
Yeah, which is why we need to defend two things very much. Wherever we can, talk people to people. Don't give that up, because that's what they want to shut down, the people to people conversation. And from my culture, besides the ecology and the Ayurveda and all of that, what I've realized is, my God, our civilization was so clever. They attacked organic, we created regeneration. Now they're attacking regeneration, and everyone's going in a tizzy. I said, in India, we never created one word for one thing, because no one thing is just one thing, It is so many facets. So the Ganga has 1,000 names. The divine, feminine beauty has 1,000 names. We always gave 1,000 names. So they can attack one. We've still got 999. We will always, against the 1%, we will always have the diversity, multiplicity, and freedom of the 99%.
Yeah. And that's the key is just, but it's a matter of, I mean, they because of their resources, they're very sophisticated, very clever, and they can create some strategies that are hard to circumvent, but we outnumber them. And as long as we cooperate and collaborate, I think I'm confident we can defeat them. All right. Any last words in closing to sum it all up and give a recommendation?
Yeah, no. When all the spiritual forces and all of nature's forces and most of people's forces are aligned together, what can 5 billionaires, technocrats who want to be richer than they are, greedier than they are, more violent than they are, they don't count in the long run, really. So it's just that we cannot afford to not do the things we can do.
All right.
Together.
I agree. And one of them is a boycott on this thing. So I'm excited about it.
Boycott. Yeah, absolute. Boycott fake food. And I think another part of this should be, big tech has already messed up. It's surveillance capitalism. Let big tech not enter our bodies. Let big tech not enter life sciences.
I couldn't agree more. I'm absolutely, totally on board with that and fascinated with that concept because there's a lot of details behind what you just said. And I'm really focusing much of my free time and attention on that now because I'm trying to understand the big picture because it's huge. It really is very complex.
They're running very fast on very, very bad ground, Yeah. I mean, like I worked on nanoparticle assessments and we said it can't be assessed. Don't go down that way. A technology whose safety you can't know should not be given permission to go ahead commercially.
Right. Precautionary principle.
Yeah, absolutely, the precautionary principle. So I think if you were to start pulling together all the homeopaths, the Ayurvedic physicians, the natural healers, these are people who make choices in their lives to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't get together now, exactly what Carnegie and Rockefeller did, to say all natural medicine is illegal, these guys will make life illegal. Living will be illegal, except as a little piece in their machine, under their permission, through their permission. The rest of you are throwaway people.
Yeah, and we have it sounds odd, but the technology I'm a big fan of, and it's advancing so rapidly, exponentially actually, that will be practical reality because they're converting all of us into digital assets. I think that's their plan, and that they can control and manipulate and essentially, dictate their ultimate goals. So, it's just that. So, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen. We just have to bring awareness to it, and we can resist it. So happy to connect with you and look forward to working with you in the future.